Charlotte. Okay, so good morning, members. My name is Karen Bowen. I'm the Democratic Services Officer supporting the meeting today. I understand that Councillor Good will be joining us this morning for the meeting. In the meantime, oh, Councillor Good, you've just arrived. Thank you very much. I had asked Councillor Diath if you would share while we were waiting for you, because we have to start at 10. But thank you for joining. I'll do the housekeeping if you want me to, or I'm happy for you to take over.
No, that's fine, thanks. Sorry for the delay, folks. I've just realised my Bridgend laptop has decided that my camera does not exist anymore, so I've had to quickly improvise and find a personal laptop. So apologies for that. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Joint Committee this morning. So may I remind everyone presenting that this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet and recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand using the raise hand function? I will then come to you in due course as chair. If I fail to notice your hand, please feel free to put a message in the chat so that myself or Democratic Services can bring it to my attention. When invited to speak, please turn on your microphone and camera so you can be seen and heard. And if for any reason this is not working, please bring this to attention to the Democratic Services. Please don't use the chat to engage in debate, but please do feel free to use the chat to raise any technical issues as mentioned. If you have any issues hearing or being heard, please let us know. So moving on to the agenda. So agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I haven't received any from the chair, but Democratic Services, do you?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Sivignani, she will join, but probably not until about 45 minutes into the meeting. If she doesn't join at all, I'll obviously give apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to item 2 then, a minute for the annual meeting held on the 27th of September 2023. Were there any comments or questions to be raised about that? No? Okay, could I have someone to move and second the minutes?
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis.
I'll second that.
Thank you,
Councillor Drake. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. Thank you. Right, swiftly moving on to item 3, to receive declarations of interest. Would anyone like to raise any declarations at this point before we go on to the reports? No, I don't see any hands raised. Great. Okay, so we'll move on to the reports that we have in front of us today. So item number 4, which is Shared Regulatory Services Overview and Update Report. So I think we're kicking off because we're going around the houses with this, with all the talents presenting in this report, I think. So we'll start off with Helen to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yes, this will be teamwork again, this overview and update report. So I'm going to start in the traditional fashion with a quick update on human resources matters, and really pleasing to report that our sickness absence rate is much improved, and you'll see that at the end of Q2 it stood at 2.29 days lost per full-time equivalent member of staff, and that compares to 6.29 in the same quarter of last year. And obviously that's something that we've discussed at Joint Committee previously. Unfortunately, we had a number of long-term absences which were causing the higher rate. So we're really pleased to see that that has improved. We've spoken at length to Joint Committee about the difficulties we've experienced in recruitment and retention of staff, and this is something that is an issue right across regulatory services in Wales and further afield. And we've spoken about the causes of that and some of the solutions that we are hoping to put in place and supporting, obviously, the regulatory apprenticeship. For all of that, I'm really pleased to share the fact that we have had some notable recruitment successes during Q2 or to the end of Q2, and we've been able to fill a number of roles, so that is really encouraging. The recruitment and retention landscape makes it all the more important that we continue to develop staff and make sure that they're eligible and in line to apply for more senior roles as they arise. And I put a note in 2.3 there to mark the fact that the team manager has left. I'm really pleased that we've been able to appoint from within the service to that role. And 2.4 is simply an update on what was quite a big move to get pretty much the licensing team for serving Cardiff Council out of City Hall and into new accommodation, which is very nice, in County Hall, with all the masses of paperwork that went along with that. So quite a big feat there, masterminded by Will, amongst others. So an update on exactly where we are with that. So I can see now, Chair, that Matt Baumer has joined the meeting, and he will be going on to the finance section next. But if there are any questions on that first part of the report, happy to take those now.
Thanks for that, Helen. I think just from me, I think, it's really positive to see the improvement in rates of absence and long-term sick within the service, which I think is really positive, and I think that speaks well for the future. I think the only thing for me is, I think it's mentioned in 2.2 of the report that we successfully made a business case to HM Treasury for a digital marketeer to join the team, which I think is very positive, and I think definitely needed when we're looking at things like vapes, etc., and how we promote to people that there are such things as illegal vapes. There are also things as illegal breeds of dog. So I think that's very positive. I guess my only question there is, are we looking at, with the financial situation for local authorities being what it is, are we making sure that we're going out there and looking for those sort of things where we can get external funding from either UK or Welsh government or other sources to fund extra bits that we need to make sure we carry out the work?
Yes, very, very much so. At every opportunity, we will always make a bid for funding such as this, where we've been able to take on an apprentice. Quite often, the funding that we're able to tap into doesn't allow us to cover the employment costs, but it does help us with enforcement. So we're always looking out for that, and there's some interesting developments in terms of vapes, with some funding being made available from Welsh Government for that enforcement.
Great, thank you for that, Helen. Do any other members have any questions at this point on HR matters? No? Okay, well, thank you for that, Helen, and we'll come back to you in due course. If we could move on to part 2 of the report, which will be presented by Matt Baumer, please, on the financial position.
Morning, everyone, and sorry I'm a bit late. I had loads of diary holes in my diary for this, but not the actual meeting. So a bit of a mad panic a couple of minutes ago. So on the finances, obviously the headlines are in the executive summary. We set the budget back in February. That seems a long time ago now, doesn't it? £8.645 million. The main thing at that time we had quite some difficulty around was actually pitching what level we needed to forecast the pay award for, and we put 5% in. The actual, a couple of days after council in the Vale, 4th of March last year, we actually had the offer coming through from the employers, and it was £1,925 back then. There's been a significant period of negotiation and a delay to actually it being finalised, but that was finalised last month, and actually people will see that going in their pay packets in December. It's given us a small, relatively small budget pressure of about 30k. The overall, the shared services a pressure of 290k, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment. It has been necessary to support some of that underlying pressure through the use of reserves, and they've been to support the animal services and food services within the core offer. I think it's important just to get into a bit more of the detail, and that's in paragraphs 2.1 onwards. So 2.1 gives the overall position, and that's the 290k overspend, but it's more important to look at it against the authority specific and the core, and that details firstly in 2.5 of the report, that table. And we do have an underlying under budgeting of licensing costs in Cardiff. So the majority of the 290k overspend is in authority specific services. That's 245, of which a large component of it is in the taxi licensing section. So there's marginal variations for Cardiff and the Vale, about a 239k pressure there for Cardiff. And then in the core offer, we've just got a relatively well, it is relatively small overspend of 45k when you look against the overall budget of £6 million. That does hide a couple of underlying pressures that I alluded to when mentioning the reserves a couple of moments ago. So there have been some real financial pressures in the animal services, and that's down to the number of dog seizures. There's an overspend of 96k there, but we've drawn down reserves to mitigate the majority of that. Similarly, some similar pressures with food services, where there's been the need to clear a backlog, and that forecast overspends 160k. Again, that's been mitigated down with the use of 100k of reserves. So overall, 45k. Just move to the reserves. The reserves are still healthy. Shows those two movements that I've just mentioned, and what we're doing with Helen and team, continuing to monitor the overall finances on a regular basis. There is some history that some of those staffing pressures will ease throughout the rest of the year. So it may be that the 45k actually resolves itself. If it doesn't, then that will be a call on the reserves. So that's the main headlines from the finance report this morning. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Matt. Do we have any questions from members for Matt on this? I don't see any hands up as of yet. Just one from me, Matt. So with regards to the reserves, obviously, I think we can all understand that in the current situation that we all find ourselves in, use of reserves is necessary, I think, and I think we all appreciate that. And I know that you've sort of said, well, we're in quite a healthy position of about 500,000 in reserves, but with I think the thing for me is reserves can obviously only be spent once, and if we are anticipating going forward 100 grand, 100 grand, 100 grand, then that quickly diminishes, as I'm finding in my own budget discussions in Bridgend. And I think the bit that concerns me, I guess, is actually the specific legal reserve that has gone from 71,000 to 11,000 in year, which again, I think is quite concerning if we do find ourselves with no reserves left for within the legal pot. So I just wondered if there was any officer that could shed light on what that reserve specifically has been spent on. And then Matt, maybe if there was some info you could give us on if there are any plans currently about how to replenish those reserves to make sure that going forward we do continue to have healthy incomes coming into that reserve pot.
Yeah, I'm not too sure myself about what the legal reserve was spent on. I don't know if I might need Helen to help me out on that bit, and then I'll come back and cover your second part of your question.
Thanks, Matt. I'm not sure the kind of nomenclature for these reserves, why they're called what they're called, but that £60,000 that was the planned drawdown from the specific legal reserve. If you go back to 2.18, I'm talking about the food services. So food services currently forecasting 60k overspend, and I think it's the drawdown from there to cover that off.
So I presume it's legal fees from prosecutions then, I would presume.
Actually, no, that isn't.
Okay, well, no worries. But if officers could go away and have a look at
Yeah.
that and maybe email members, that would be really helpful. Thank you. And then Matt, to the second
Yeah,
part.
and I'm sort of almost blue in the face from touting out that line that you've just mentioned. Reserves, you can only use them once, so we've got to be really careful about them. And similar to colleagues I've been speaking to in the Vale, it looks like we've got healthy reserves, but when you look at the pressures coming down the line, they can disappear really quickly. I guess on this one, the overall reserves are relatively healthy, and whilst I've not spoken specifically to Helen about this, I would imagine we'd at year end would perhaps have a look at what the reserves are and the breakdown, and that if we need to move some of the money from the general fund reserve into the legal because we see that as a specific risk, that's something we'd need to do.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Matt. Just to check, do any members want to come in at all? No, they're all very quiet today. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part of the report. Thank you, Matt. To performance and monitoring, which is in Appendix 2 of the first report, which I think we have Christina and Will to present it to us.
Thanks, Chair, and morning, everyone. I will, as usual, call on a colleague to share screen for me. So this really is a team effort once again. So Jason's going to share the screen and I'll talk you through my specific areas of performance. So if we can move down, lovely. Okay, so the first slide in front of you, which of course is in your packs, relates to the high risk food hygiene intervention. So our category A and B related premises, and glad to see a sea of green there, so 100% in terms of performance, so all looking good in terms of A's and B's. Moving on, we have category C rated premises. Of course, these are premises that require an intervention once every 18 months. Now, we've been talking throughout this financial year in terms of the backlog of inspections due to COVID-19, the pandemic, and of course the recovery plan that we were working towards with the Food Standards Agency. Whilst you see red in front of you, you'll recall from previous figures that this is actually we are making really good progress in terms of resolving some of the backlog issues here. So although reporting red currently, the reports that I'm running behind the scenes demonstrate that we are really making progress in this area. As we've just mentioned in terms of the finance position, some of this work has needed to be done by the use of external contractors. That has always been the case in terms of the food service due to the lack of resource that we've got in this area. But of course, because we have such a high number here in terms of what's due and the backlog cause, we have needed to use more contractors than usual. But pleasing to see some progress being made in any case in terms of the numbers of category C rated premises. So moving on to the next slide relates to new businesses. Again, very much the same story. We're still working through a backlog, but pleasing to see some progress made in terms of new businesses. And I think we will be very much back on track at the end of the financial year. And of course, the last indicator relating to food in particular is the broadly compliant performance indicator, which of course, broadly compliant is premises that are scoring a food hygiene rating score of 3 or above. So still looking very good in terms of the performance there. What we are seeing is as we're reaching those premises that we haven't been to in some time, We are seeing an increase in enforcement action that's required to get them up to speed. But nevertheless, our Brody compliance score here are looking really good, and a sea of green in front of you. I'm going to pause there, Councillor Good, just in terms of food, just to take any questions in relation to food before I move on to trading standards, if I may.
Yeah, thanks for that, Christine. Just one from me, actually, and then I'll bring in Councillor Diath. And it may be one that actually I should have asked Matt in the previous piece, but obviously, as you mentioned, we're sort of trying to work our way through the backlog created by COVID, which, as you mentioned, has increased the number of agency staff that we require, which obviously increased costs. And I was just wondering, do we have sort of a run rate and a tapering to that? At what point do we sort of anticipate that cost will reduce? Is it in the next year, next 2 years?
Yeah, so this year really is the year for us in terms of getting back up to sort of on a normal keel for us. Our backlog numbers at the start of the year were significant, because of course we're the largest food service in Wales, so for us numbers are always big. I'm anticipating that after this financial year we'll be on a sort of level playing field. We'll still need to use contractors for some of our work, but nowhere near as to what we've needed to for this year. But of course, you'll recall in previous financial years, food, of course, did report a significant underspend. So this is the year really for us to catch up in terms of the work that is required. But I am hoping that this is the year for us in terms of catching up. In any case, and we'll be in a better position next financial year.
Thank you for that response. I'll bring in Councillor Diath.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask virtually the same question as you, to be honest, but I was wondering, Christina, I mean, can you envisage a scenario where, I mean, we're obviously facing very difficult budgets, where we reduce the budget for the service, so we end up in a situation where instead of reaching that even keel you've described, we need to keep using contractors because we've sucked out staff capacity, and we end up with a slight false economy? Can you see that playing out?
Yeah, so in terms of food, you recall we report the Food Law Enforcement Service Plan. We did that at the last meeting, and I forecast the amount of staff that is required to deliver the full programme of food. Yeah. And as you know, I report every year that we simply do not have enough resource to undertake the full programme of what is required. So there is a little bit of needing to use that contractor type arrangement staff to sort of bolster us slightly in terms of numbers. And I see that will be needed year on year. But to give some reassurance in that area, the contractors that we have, we negotiate very good value for money. We pay on a and as such we're very keen in terms of monitoring that the work that they undertake is of the necessary standard that we expect of our staff also. Sure. So there's tight management in terms of those contractors as well. But unfortunately, we are very lean as a food service, and as such, we do need that extra resource to really undertake our statutory duties in that service area.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not criticising for you for using contractors by any means, but so potentially we could be at a point where if we were to take another big chunk out of the SRS budget, we'd actually down the line have to spend more money on contractors.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't. It's not optional. This piece of work is statutory, and we're obligated to deliver that service. So if we take staff out of that service, we will need to find that resource elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you. Something to consider around our budget setting discussions.
Yes.
Right, thank you for that. Very important question, Councillor Diath, and I'll try not to steal your thunder again for the next question. Right, do we have anything else there, or should we ask Christina to move on? Cool. Carry on, Christina.
So two more slides from me, and first of all is the high risk trading standards inspections. As you can see, sea of green there, so all looking on target for end of the financial year. And the new businesses, as I've reported previously, Trading Standards new businesses are directly linked to the food hygiene new businesses, in that we have our environmental health food officers undertaking some food standards inspections at the same time as environmental health interventions, a 2-for-1 if you like, and as such the red performance that you're seeing in food hygiene directly impacts this performance indicator also. So hope that provides an explanation in terms of red, but as I said, hoping to see more improvements throughout the financial year to get us back on an even keel.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Any questions on trading standards at all? Yep, Councillor Drake.
I was just going to ask, have we had many new businesses being formed since the pandemic? Because I know a lot closed down, within the pandemic. Have we had many? The increase has been dramatically.
So in terms of new businesses generally across SRS, it is a significant issue for us, particularly in Cardiff, and we average on around 55 new businesses a month. Just because it's such a transient nature, we get lots of businesses opening and closing. It is slightly quieter in the Vale and Bridgend, but in compared to other authorities, Councillor Drake, we are very busy in the new business arena, just because so many open and close, and that's just the sign of the times as to where we are and the nature of the food businesses that we have in the area. So yeah, that new businesses is a busy area of work for us, and unfortunately.
Well, I'm sure you'll keep on top of it.
I hope so.
Great, thank you, Councillor Drake. Right, is that the end of your? No, you've got more. Okay, carry on.
I now pass to Will for his bit of the service. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Morning, Will.
Morning, Chair. Thanks, Chris. Looking at my areas, the noise and air pollution, I'm pleased to report a sea of green, which is always good. And that's really exceptional performance by the team, because they have been under quite a bit of pressure, but despite that have maintained the percentage of noise and air complaints that we answer within the stipulated period. So that's pleasing. Moving on to commercial, apart from one complaint, again, a sea of green, so very good performance there as well. Moving on to licensing, Jace, obviously there's one area where we normally see a sea of green, but unfortunately, due to some industrial action in Cardiff, we were unable to make that hearing. So I think the last time I reported to members a non-green targets was when, unfortunately, we had the death of the monarch, and this was due to strike action in Cardiff. So otherwise it would have been 100%, which is our legal statutory duty, really. I think, Jace, if you move on to the MEES, that might be the next one that's worth quickly running through. So members will recall that in previous reports, we introduced this category as a way of capturing the work we're doing, engaging with landlords in respect of minimum energy efficiency standard, or MEES. So this work has continued throughout the year, and you can see in the bottom box we now have an additional 114 properties where direct engagement has led to improved EPCs. So that's all positive work, and that equates, probably difficult to see in the text there, but that equates to a reduction of approximately 300 tonnes of CO2 and over 300,000 kilowatt hours in heating energy that's saved, and also for tenants of those properties, reduction in heating costs. So it's very much a work in progress, and the next stage we are looking at progressing is a review of unrated properties. We've made some good initial progress in that regard, in that we've done nearly 7,000 record checks to date. Now the next stage, and something hopefully we'll be able to report back to members, is to get in touch with those properties and look at the unrated sector, and hopefully when we report back next, we will have some additional figures to report to members. So that's my little area. Good news on noise and air pollution, and just an update on the MEES. Happy to take any questions.
Excellent, thanks for that. Well, good to see all. Lots of green, lots of green. I guess there's just one thing for me on the energy efficiency element. Do we have any feedback on sort of interventions in empty properties where we're using the sort of empty home scheme to bring them back in? Is there any direct action that SRS are doing there to sort of say, well, actually there's funding available, and as part of that we can help you bring it up to a higher energy standard?
Not directly in this indicator, Chair, but obviously each of the three authorities now have an empty homes programme, which SRS lead on since we've been provided with money by the Vale Glamorgan, and obviously in time when the properties are brought back into beneficial use, you know, that there will be some improvements there, but not directly into this this category.
No worries, thanks a lot. Do any other members have any questions for Will at this point? No, I don't see any hands. Okay, thank you for that. Well,
thank you.
I think we're now moving on to illegal dog breeding with Jason, so he gets to move his own screen now, which is good for him. Or is someone else doing the screen for you, Jace? You're on mute. Still on mute.
Sorry, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, no, I'm not showing my screen. Just going to go through some bits in the report that my service area has been working on. So, yeah, you've mentioned the illegal dog breeding, really. So again, this is a key area of work that we get involved in and continue to receive ongoing intelligence and reports of illegal dog breeding activity from partner agencies and from members of the public, really. So yeah, over the last quarter that we have been involved in approximately 3 seizures, and we have been having to seize dogs, and where that is occurring, obviously we have to go through a formal process with the court, what we call it a Section 20 hearing under the Section 20 order under the Animal Welfare Act, to get the dogs legally signed over to us before we can do that. So the report is just highlighting also a really successful prosecution against 2 individuals where we were involved in this, really. So it was a case where 11 dogs were seized, and including this were 9 puppies. Really serious animal welfare, Section 4 offences here. And during the course, 5 of the dogs did have to be euthanized on this, really. So the report you'll see in paragraph 2.11 shows some of the pictures of the dogs that were seized. So eye infections, the puppies there held in a crate, no movement to move or anything like that. As I said, 5 of the dogs had such conditions that they did have to be euthanized. So the successful case there resulted in the defendants getting suspended prison sentences of 22 and 14 weeks, and one of the defendants has a disqualification of keeping animals for over 8 years, really. So a really good successful outcome, and the team really worked hard to get that prosecution through, really. So we did get ordered costs, £4,000 from each of the defendants, and they've also been ordered to pay some complete 180 hours and 120 hours respectively of unpaid work on that. The report then moves on to the XL bully ban release. So we just thought it was key to let members know of the incoming ban, basically. So the UK central government did announce on October 31st that the ban would be coming in, which means that the XL bully type dogs will be included to Section 1 of the Dangerous Dog Acts, which means they will become a banned breed from the 31st of December. So from the 31st of December, as the report indicates there, it's going to be against the law to actually sell an XL bully, abandon an XL bully, give away an XL bully, and have an XL bully in public without a lead or a muzzle. This is a 2-phase approach from the central government. So there's a second piece coming in then from the 1st of February, where there will actually be a criminal offence for anyone to own an XL bully, unless they've applied for a certificate of exemption for each of the XL bullies that they own. So that has to be applied for. They have to pay a fee for that. And they have to meet certain criteria in terms of having the dogs neutered and also having third-party liability insurances to keep the dogs, really. So we'll be working with the police, because obviously the enforcement of Section 1 of the dangerous dogs is through the police, and they will be the authority who will be typing dogs and taking any offences against Section 1 taking any prosecutions of Section 1 offences. Obviously, we will still play a role in terms of stray dog provisions, and I'm sure members of the public will be making any inquiries to us. And as members will be aware, we've briefed all elected members from each of the 3 authorities with a briefing note on the XL bully bans in case they get inquiries either from dog owners who they think people may have an XL bully, or from concerned members of the public about the ban, and that people are flouting the law when it comes into force, really. So I'll take a pause there for any questions on either of those aspects in terms of the illegal breeding or XL bully ban from members.
Great, thanks, Jace. And you know, I think terribly sad that we've had to destroy some animals, but I think equally, you know, it's good to hear that those prosecutions have been successful. On the XL bully ban, just from me, is there plans in place perhaps, because I would imagine that, you know, identifying a XL bully from a bulldog isn't necessarily the easiest thing, and I was wondering if we'd seen a particular increase in inquiries that, you know, could potentially affect staffing hours, etc., and caseload from the public, and then equally on the other side, is it being considered that we perhaps roll out some education to the public to help them properly identify an XL bully from other breeds?
Yeah, so the government guidance is anyone, basically it's up to a member of the public really, if they think that their dog is meeting, there's a specific definition and guidance document that the government has released on the DEFRA web pages, basically. So the dog has to meet the minimum height standard, which the guidance says, basically. So if the dog meets that and then meets all the other characteristics that are set out in the guidance document, it's the government is that people take a precautionary approach and apply for the exemption if they think their dog is meeting those. In terms of actual typing the dogs, that is actually going to be the responsibility of the police and the dog liaison officers, basically. So they've been having training on that. Vets can also do the typing as well, because people can apply for, you know, if they did have a dog that meets the definition and they didn't want to keep the dog or apply for the exemption, they can receive compensation up to £200 to have the dog euthanized, which the vet would then type if people bring that in, basically, and get the compensation that the vet signs that off, really. So the guidance is out there for the members of the public. We've put information on our websites pinpointing people, directing people to that guidance as well, basically. So it is available for members of the public to see, really.
Okay, thank you for that, Jace. Councillor Lewis, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I had a resident that was concerned about their dog. I actually referred it to Jason, and they are happy with the response they've had. So thank you for that.
Okay, yeah. If you do get queries, we're happy to look at them initially. And, if we need further advice, we'll speak to the police or direct members of the public to the dog liaison office to speak to them as well if they want further support in getting any of the dogs typed, basically.
Great, thank you for that, Councillor Lewis. If there's no other questions, can move on, Jace.
Yeah, so just giving some updates for another key area of supporting the local economy, and just an update on the annual audit on our UCAS accredited metrology lab in Cardiff. So again, that was undertaken early in the summer. I'm pleased to say that the audit was successful, and it was ensured that we kept our requirements to get the ISO standard of 17025 2017. Really pleasing that the auditors found the lab's internal audit program is comprehensive and up to date with the management. We are providing effective and giving the management team an understanding of the lab's performance. There were 2 minor mandatory corrective actions, which we're pleased to say that they were easily corrected and have been signed off and are closed off now with the auditors. We've really wanted to update that we're looking to do is just try and expand the business of the lab, really, because it does provide us with an income stream, and obviously with the budgetary positions we've been discussing earlier in the meeting, any income we can generate, is helping to contribute to any savings. So the provision of the services, we've got a well-established client base, and we're looking to expand that. We've recently been expanding some of the weights that we can undertake assessments for. And one of the other aspects that we've looked at is to actually use the lab to offer training services to other statutory inspectors for weights and measures qualifications. So we'll be running our first training course in our own lab basically in January basically, and there's been some good sort of uptake on that. The training is delivered in a 2-day block, and it's going to be in conjunction with the Chartered Trading Standards Institute's lead officers for weights and measures. Obviously, we are the only UCAS accredited local authority metrology lab in Wales, and we're hoping that these training courses are going to, hopefully be really popular, and we can look to expand it going forward to next year, basically. So really quite exciting that we're offering these training courses and supporting the development of future weights and measures officers. Just a quick update then on some of the safeguarding work we've done recently. So the national safeguarding has recently taken place. That was the 13th to the 17th of November. And the lead up to that week, one of our officers did present at the Money and Pension Services for the Wales Consumer Protection Forum on the 7th of November. And this focused on helping people with consumer protection issues, and particular focus on scams and doorstep crime. During the actual week of National Safeguarding Week, officers provided training to the 50+ forum volunteers in Cardiff. And again, this training was focusing on how to stop scams and doorstep crime, and how victims can actually report that to us or the police. And further training is going to be taking part on the 7th of December last week as well. And in addition, we've also been visiting GP surgeries in the Vale of Glamorgan, raising awareness and requesting that the surgeries display our SRS scams and doorstep advice to ensure that anyone attending surgeries can have raised awareness while they're waiting in those surgeries. And we're going to be sort of rolling this out more widely across GP surgeries, also in Bridgend and Cardiff over the coming weeks as resources allow within the team, really. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions either on the Met Lab or the safeguarding work we've been undertaking recently.
Great, thanks, Jason. I think the metrology lab sounds really positive. I think hopefully it can be a good income stream for the service. I get the only thing that occurs, and maybe this is like being a bit pie in the sky. I'm trying to run before we can walk, but I wonder if there's any opportunity, perhaps in the future, where we could maybe look to speaking to Teddington. And apologies, I have no idea how this system works, to the point where Helen had to tell me yesterday that it wasn't checking the weather, and in fact it was to do with weighing things. But whether there was any opportunity to speak with the national lab in Teddington and sort of see if they would be willing to have a campus in Wales, perhaps based in SRS, where we could, offer not just the training, but then the accreditation for that qualification.
Yeah, we can definitely have those conversations, Councillor, and I think it's any opportunity to increase the the scope and the presence of the lab. We're really keen to explore those opportunities. So yeah, that's definitely something we'll take away and explore further.
Excellent, great. Well, thank you, Jason. I don't see any other hands up. If anyone's jumping quickly, no. Okay, cool. Brilliant. Thanks, Jason. I'm sure we'll hear from you in following reports.
Yeah, no worries. I think it's passing over back to Helen now. I think.
Yes. Yeah. Helen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just a really quick run through from 2.25 for me. So this is in respect of new legislation which is coming the way of the shared service, and we've mentioned in a previous joint committee the ban on the supply of single-use plastics for Wales. That was successfully implemented on the 30th of October, and you'll see in 2.26 a list of the products that are covered. Generally, I think it's fair to say that the trade has adapted to those changes, and the fact that this legislation was previously introduced in England and prior to that again in Scotland has helped with that transition. Phase 2, we believe, will come in possibly the spring of 2026, so some more work for us to do there in terms of preparing the trade with that tranche of single-use plastics which will be banned at that point. 2.28, just a quick mention of some legislation which will be amended from April, and that will mean that businesses will be obliged to separate their waste in the same way as domestic waste needs to be separated. And while this is largely a National Resources Wales responsibility, the shared service will have some responsibility through environmental health side of things in terms of ensuring that food businesses are not disposing of food waste through the drains. And 2.29, again, just saying that it's on the horizon. We still believe that the special procedures regime will be with us in the summer of next year, 2024, and plans are being put in place to really gear up for that in terms of inspections, licensing, and of course providing that qualification for the practitioners as well. 2.30 is just to say, as is very often the case, unfortunately, there isn't any additional funding which comes with those new areas of responsibility. So I'm happy to take any questions there, Chair.
Thanks, Helen. It's a bit of a shame that there isn't extra funding to go with it, but we all get used to that, aren't we? Okay, anyone have any questions about single-use plastic or any of the other new legislation coming into force? No, I must say I've done a scouring around the members' floor in BCBC, and I'm yet to find any single-use plastic, but I have told Kelly that we need to make sure we're not doing it. So thank you for that. I think we're leaving you there, Helen, and moving back to Chris, I believe, for an update on public health.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll recall that in September Joint Committee, we provided a little bit of a briefing in terms of e-cigarettes or vapes, which captured the interest of Joint Committee members. And since then, there has been a Westminster Government consultation, which is called Creating a Smoke-Free Generation and Tackling Youth Vaping. And paragraph 2.32 of the documentation details the question posed, which we, of course, provided our view to. But today we have Jackie Hotchkiss with us, who's the team manager for the Trading Standards team. And Jackie will be providing a presentation for you in terms of vapes and the issues we face and some of the work that's ongoing currently. So if I could invite Jackie to come onto the screen and deliver the presentation. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks very much, Christina, and thank you for inviting me here today to talk about this. I will attempt to share my screen. Don't know whether anybody seeing that at all. No.
Oh, there you go.
There we are. Okay, like I said, thanks very much for inviting me to, along today. I'm just going to give a very short presentation about nicotine inhaling devices, electronic cigarettes, or vapes as they are widely known, and explain why this is a priority for SRS and why they've also been identified as a strategic priority for Trading Standards Wales and across the wider UK as well. So there's obviously very strong support for e-cigarettes within public health as an effective cessation tool for people who currently smoke. And it's widely reported that these devices offer the biggest success rate in quitting smoking for those groups of people. And there's also no doubt that e-cigarettes are important products to retail as well and continue to be a growing market in the UK economy. And just to give you an example, with regards to market size in the UK, vapes actually equate to £2.89 billion, growing at a rate of 7.7% per annum. And by comparison, tobacco equates to £14.9 billion. However, there are several areas of concern from an enforcement perspective that I want to discuss today, and those are primarily illegal vapes. So illegal vapes is easily identified by anything over about 600, what they call 600 puffs. The problem that we're having as well with underage sales of vapes, product safety, and also the environmental concerns surrounding the disposal of vapes. So currently, to get an e-cigarette to market legally in the UK, it needs to comply with the Tobacco and Related Products Regulations of 2016. So the manufacturer must notify the MHRA, that's the Medical and Healthcare Regulatory Authority, via a submission portal. And then the product is reviewed for compliance and then published on the MHRA list. Basically, if it's not on the list, it can't legally be sold in the UK. And I think, interestingly, some of the figures that I have here will show just how many products are coming to market and how quickly this has evolved. So in 2019-20, 458 products were listed on the portal. In 2021, again, COVID, we saw a sort of drop off in everything. There were 297. But then 21-22, we had 3,881 products come through the portal. 2022-2023, 7,605 products. And between April and August of 23 this year, 3,250 products. And unsurprisingly, as with everything, there are also innovative products that are being developed, sometimes to try and circumvent the regulations. And there are also loopholes in the legislation as well that regulates these products. And in the middle there, you can see an example of something that's just had approval from MHRA for a vape to be legal. It's got to have a tank size of no more than 2 millilitres. And this product that has been developed is called a twist vape, and it has approval from the MHRA. And you can see that there are actually 4 2 mil tanks within this, and each tank has been decided as an individual product. So you just twist this product, and you have 600, if you like, puffs per individual tank on this product. The photo that you're looking in the top right was from a recent seizure that we did in Cardiff, where we received just over 1,000 vapes. You will have also seen many headlines from the UK around vapes, and of great concern to most people, I think, are the child vaping crisis, as people are calling it. In particular concern is that of children. From a health perspective, evidence is still being gathered about the long-term effects of vaping, and it may be many, many years before we actually know the full extent of how people are affected by vaping, in particular children. And encouragingly, there's a shop in Merthyr that was closed recently. They had a closure order for 3 months, a shop that was selling illegal vapes and vapes to children. And this is an area that SRS are looking at to be able to deal effectively with this problem. So our current challenges, as I mentioned before, illegal vapes. These are not only overstrength vapes, but they're also ones that don't bear any safety information or markings or warnings, and there's no evidence of compliance with any safety standards as per the regulations. The vapes are on sale when they're not actually registered with the MHRA. And worryingly as well, vapes that are declaring to be 0% nicotine, but actually do have nicotine in them. Underage sales is a growing area of concern. And again, nicotine-containing vapes are an age-restricted product, so they can't actually be sold to a person under the age of 18. And as you saw from the previous photograph, some of these vapes have very child-appealing appearances. They're sometimes in cartoon characters. We know that they have very attractive flavors and bright packaging, and there have been news stories about young people being able to match their outfits to the vape that they can actually buy. And very much along the same lines as illegal tobacco, these are very affordable to young people as well. They are available at pocket money prices. And of course, there are some vapes on the market which don't contain nicotine, and as such, there are actually no age restrictions to the supply of this product. I understand that loophole is going to be closed, hopefully, with an update in legislation coming from Westminster. With regards to product safety, luckily, the incidents of exploding batteries are very rare. However, a growing area of concern for us as enforcement officers is the storage of these products. We are seizing thousands of these products and having to store them until either they are disposed of or until any investigation ends and we take the case to court. So a recent risk assessment has advised that any products that are seized are actually kept in their original packaging to avoid them being damaged, because of course all of these products contain chemicals and lithium-ion batteries, so there is a risk of explosion and fire if they get damaged. So we now actually put all of the seized product into if it's loose, we put it into cardboard to be able to store it safely and to prevent any damage. And one of the biggest problems with this product, and I know this has been in the news headlines as well, is with regard to the disposal. And the word itself, I think, is very confusing. A disposable vape, single-use vape, where in actual fact, as I mentioned before, they've got chemicals in them. They've got lithium-ion batteries. The chemicals can be very damaging to wildlife and pets if they're ingested. And of course, our waste collections, our waste system involves crushing and compacting, and there's a very real risk of fire, when dealing with this product. So the OPSS, which is the Office of Product Safety and Standards, enforce the waste electrical and electronic equipment regulations on behalf of DEFRA. So businesses that actually have a physical store and sell over £100,000 worth of electricals a year must have a system to take back waste, to dispose of it correctly. And for those premises that don't have £100,000 worth of sales or don't have a physical presence, so they're an online, there is a distributor take back scheme which directs consumers how to dispose of their waste electricals safely. So to give you an idea of some of the work that we're doing in SRS, so the Intel in 2002 is plotted on the top right, which is the blue markers, and the Intel for 2023, you can see there is a similar amount of intelligence that we're getting through various means, really, members of the public, police officers, from the reporting portals that we have, and the seizures as well. You can see that we have a significant number of seizures of illegal vapes, and in fact this quarter 3, we as a result of the intelligence that we received, we did 31 test purchases, and then we had 16 sales from those test purchases. And as a result of that, we carried out 15 inspections and we had 8 seizures of over 1,000 vapes, which equates to about £13,500 worth of vapes. And we also carried out a warrant at a private address, a residential address. The intelligence around this was particularly disturbing because we had reports that somebody was contacting children via social media and then actually going to meet those children at places like McDonald's and skate parks, and selling them vapes at these venues. And some of these children were as young as 11. And I'm very pleased to say that warrant was executed successfully a couple of weeks ago, and we seized a significant quantity of vapes from that premises, and that's currently still under investigation, that matter. Moving on to our underage sales. So underage sales within SRS, that again, a huge amount of intelligence, particularly last year, we had 192 pieces of intelligence about people selling vapes to children under the age of 18. And we try and carry out underage sales operations at least once a quarter using volunteers. And in 2022, we had 10 sales. And in 2023, so far we've had 9 sales. But as you can see, the intelligence that we're receiving around these matters is significant. And just to give you an example of this is test purchases across Wales, because I'm sure you're interested in, where does SRS sit, within Wales. And as you can see, SRS at the moment, within 2022, 2023, we had the most amount of test purchase attempts for vapes, which is the blue line that is indicated on this. Sorry, there's 2 blue lines I can see, but the blue line that you can see here, they are indicators of how many test purchase attempts were made for e-cigarettes, and it is a growing concern across Wales. So that concludes my presentation. I'm very happy to take any questions. With regard to our last quarter, we did 12 tests.
Children, I think that is really worrying. And I think when we still don't really know what the results of long-term vape use, regardless of whether it has nicotine in it or not, it is really concerning. So I'm really glad to see that we're doing a lot of work around that. Just one from me. It was brought to my attention actually within my own ward last week that someone was planning to open up a vape shop, and there's I imagine that there is no legal issue with that, insofar as if it's legal vaping, then it's legal vaping. But I wonder if there's anything that we could look at as a as a service to policymakers about whether there should be a review really of the idea that a shop which solely sells vapes, particularly in a place such as my ward's a small valleys community, former mining community, a lot of young people, and it just feels to me that somewhere like that which specifically just sells vapes, and knowing the populace in the ward, I find it almost impossible to believe that they will be able to make profit without selling to underage people. So is there any indication that we've had from either UK or WG about whether there is any plans to sort of say, well, actually, a shop that would just sell a vape is not going to be accepted going forward?
I'm not aware of anything at all that will prevent a person setting up a business of this nature. What we try to do as soon as we have an indication that these types of premises are setting up is we make sure that we send them advice and guidance about the product in terms of selling illegal vapes, and also the underage sales guidance as well, and what they can do to provide themselves with some sort of due diligence to prevent underage sales from happening. And that's about as much as we can do, really. I mean, as you can see, it's huge in the marketplace in terms of the growth of this product. People have used this as an opportunity to make a lot of money. And unfortunately, there's no way that we can stop these premises from opening.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was as I feared. I mean, the other big issue with us, I mean, I see it in our play parks in the area, a lot of smashed vapes that with batteries just sort of literally in the grass. So hopefully we can look at like you say, whether there is a scheme that needs to come forward that says, well, if you are selling these products, you need to have a way of returning them and disposing of them safely. But thank you for that. I'll bring in Councillor Michael.
Thanks, Rhys. Just to add my 2 bits worth of what Rhys has already said. I work in a local shopping centre in Fairwater, and I've seen recently where we have a so-called mini market which is specialising in selling shisha pipes and vapes and and all kinds of paraphernalia, which believe it or not, we haven't got a market for in the area. This is next to 2-3 new schools, hundreds of school children there. It's quite obvious that they and also the local drug runners which meet around this place. And now we've got an alcohol application from one of the shops there. This is being targeted by gangs, and I really do think that we got to get a grip on this. So if we don't, we're going to have another epidemic coming along. You're seeing them on a daily basis. You're seeing young kids, young children vaping on the way to school. You know, I see that every day. So it really is something we need to take up with the authorities, I think.
Thank you for that, Councillor Michael. And I totally agree there. I think, you know, it is something that I'm sure that the service are working closely with South Wales Police as well on sort of the wider questions of, if you are selling illegal vapes, well, what else are you selling, and what else are you involved in? Because you know, I very much doubt that it does end up just being that one. Just one last one for me. You know, I think, you know, I really welcome the new consultation on the new smoking regulations, and the idea that we would sort of aim towards a sort of non-smoking society over the next decade. But with that, obviously, and I feel like they wouldn't have told us this, but with that comes costs, because we have to make sure that that's being enforced. And I wondered if we'd had any feedback yet on whether that, you know, what would be a significant increase in what would be required by SRS in terms of investigation and prevention, would be funded from UK government or through consequentials given to the Welsh government.
I'm not sure I'm in a position to answer that. I don't know
No
whether
worries.
anybody else can.
Helen, I don't know if you've heard anything around that.
Yes, it's very much in its early stages. This proposal from Westminster Government on this sort of ever increasing age at which you can buy tobacco in the future, with the effect that anyone born before the 1st of January 2009 wouldn't be able to buy tobacco. That's the intention, and clearly that would take some time to implement. And during the course of that, then there would be some discussion about resourcing enforcement authorities to undertake that work. And I think, Jackie, it would be quite interesting when we're trying to recruit 25-year-old volunteers to actually test out whether, in years to come, whether the controls are in place. So, and the only other thing I would mention, when the question was raised earlier about any restrictions on shops that are selling vapes and little else. One of the consultation questions in the recent consultation talks about restricting outlets in this way, and there is some discussion about some sort of licensing scheme. Again, that would be a burden on local authorities in one way to actually license those premises, perhaps as in a similar way to an alcohol license, but it would certainly be another means through which the enforcement authorities would be able to take action against those who are unlicensed and should be.
Okay, thank you for that, Helen. Councillor Michael, you've got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or did you want to come back in? Take that as a legacy hand.
Yeah.
Which is also coincidentally what the name of my punk rock band is going to be one day when I finally launch it. Right, so I think that's it from us on vaping, unless we do have any last minute questions. No. Okay, well, thank you, Jackie, for that presentation. We'll let you go. And then I think we're moving back to Helen to talk about our favourite topic, prosecutions.
Yes, just very briefly to mention Appendix 3, which is the usual table that we present of prosecution cases that have concluded pretty much from the last time we met up until the end of November. And you'll see within that table, we've got 2 quite significant rogue trader cases which have concluded successfully, an illegal money lending case, a dog breeding and animal welfare case, which Jason has mentioned earlier, 3 smoke-free prosecution cases in respect of shisha bars, which were not properly ventilated. So it was smoking in an enclosed public place, and a food hygiene case where the individual has had a permanent prohibition from engaging in the management of a food business in the future, which is a really, really positive outcome. And prison sentences for the rogue traders, they totaled 32 months, and there was also a suspended prison sentence totaling 17 months. So between September and the end of November, great to see those cases concluding.
Thanks for that, Helen. I know it's been a very, very busy few months, but very positive to see some really good outcomes, particularly for some rogue traders, which I know have, always cause a lot of upset and trauma for people who sort of sign them up in good faith to do works for them and then find themselves out of pocket and feeling, sort of taken advantage of. So very positive outcomes. So thank you and all the team for all of the work on that. So that, I think, brings us to the end of the report. Just checking. So is this report for noting, Helen, or do we need...
Yeah, so the recommendation, Chair, is for Joint Committee to consider, note and agree the contents of the report.
Right, okay. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the report, please?
I will definitely move that report.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor Drake. And a seconder.
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Great stuff. So we'll move on to the second of our reports, which is SRS fees and charges for 2024-2025, which Helen is also going to present. Helen, over to you.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Hopefully this will be a brief run through some familiar ground for members. It's the annual process of setting the fees and charges which SRS would charge from the 1st of April 2024. So very briefly, you'll be familiar with the format that we've used previously. The annex sets out in 2 sections the fees and charges. So part 1, these are the fees and charges that are within the gift, within the remit of the Joint Committee. Those proposals have been put forward for approval by Joint Committee. And then for completeness, the fees and charges set out in part 2 of that annex are the fees and charges that we have to take into account, but they are set by external bodies. That might be UK government, Welsh government, or other agencies and bodies. So going through the covering paper very quickly. Clearly, in setting these fees and charges, it is a fine line between making sure that our costs are being recovered, but having an awareness of the continuing difficulties placed on our communities and businesses through cost of living pressures. So in trying to strike a balance between those two things, what we have done in the past and have always done, in fact, is to make reference to the Consumer Prices Index, CPIH, for the previous August. So we're looking now at the CPIH rate of inflation for August 2023. And that was 6.3%. And just to give some context, this time last year, when we were having the same conversation, the CPIH for August 22 was 8.6%. So it is still a significant increase, but it is reduced from where we were last year. So what I have done is to apply to all the fees and charges in part 1 of the annex, that 6.3% uplift. However, there are this year a number of exceptions to that, where we are proposing a slightly higher increase. So those are detailed in 2.5 and 2.6. 2.5, pest control, and obviously that is a Vale-only authority-specific matter. And here we've done a review of what we're charging for treatments and what it's actually costing us to deliver those treatments. And there are a number where we're not actually covering those costs sufficiently. So the proposal is that treatments for bed bugs, cockroaches, wasps, fleas, flies and carpet beetles are increased by more than the rate of inflation so that the service can recover its costs. So on page 1 of the annex in the table for, it's the wrong way around. So that's on page 2 of the annex in relation to pest control. You'll see some figures in italics, and those are the fees and charges that we're talking about, where there's a slightly higher increase being proposed. And then likewise, within the animal related category, a review of what it's costing the service to provide those licenses or to issue those licenses has been done. And there are 2 licenses where we are proposing a higher than inflation increase to reflect that fact. And those are the licenses for dog breeding and for pet vendors. And again, on page 1 of the annex, those 2 entries are indicated by being in italics. So the other thing to mention is the fact that our hourly rate for the areas where we charge for our services, so for example our primary authority work and other paid for services, the charge that we're proposing based on officer time is £80 an hour to include overheads. That's a very, very quick run through. I'll take you back to the recommendation, which is for Joint Committee to consider the SRS charging and fee proposals as set out in the report and agree to their implementation from the 1st of April 2024. I'm very happy to take any questions, Chair.
Great, thank you for that, Helen. Apologies, I got slightly distracted because the First Minister has just resigned, so my watch and my phone was going a bit mad. But yes, thank you for that. Do any members have any questions initially? No? Okay, just one from me. So I think it's in 2.1 of the report, which mentions that any fee which results in a surplus must be used to reduce fees charged in the following year. And I just wondered if there was any scope to consider whether that is the sort of best way forward, or whether there is any way of reconsidering that, because it occurs to me, obviously, as we discussed earlier with Matt, surpluses and reserves are important, and in fact, I think we're all buckling ourselves in for what could potentially be a very difficult budget round this year and next year and potentially the year after. So has there been any consideration taken, or is it possible for us to consider whether actually, if surplus for charges are made, that is reinvested into the coffers and put into reserves rather than essentially therefore reduce the following year?
The answer is no, because we can only cost recover on licensing, and there is a danger that if an authority were to generate a surplus in relation to a particular licensing regime, that there could be judicial review. Unfortunately, it isn't something that is possible.
And that goes for fees as well, so as in pest fees.
The pest control type of fees, yes, that could be could be changed. Yeah, I think what we're talking about here is in 2.1 is in relation to licensing.
Thanks for that. I think that was the only question from me. Do any other members wish to raise anything around the fees and? Oh, okay. So the recommendation is to the Joint Committee to consider SRS charging and fees proposals and to set out this report and agree their implementation from the 1st of April 2024. So could I get a mover and a seconder from the members, please?
I'm happy to move that, Chair. It's Ruba, Councillor Sivanyanam.
Thank you, Councillor Sivignon. And can I get a second?
I'll
Please?
second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Great. That's that then. So moving on to our next report. So the third report on our agenda today, SRS Budget Savings 2024-25 Part 1. Helen, I believe you're taking us through this as well.
Yes, that's right, Chair. So briefly, in this Part 1 report, I can take you through the background. So Section 1, looking at the formation of the shared service, and the whole purpose of that was to achieve three things. So a means of realising cost savings, building much needed resilience into environmental health, trading standards and licensing services, and enabling specialisms to be retained. So 1.2 sets out what the budget of the three standalone local authority regulatory services was in the financial year 2013-14, so 10 years ago, prior to the creation of this shared service, and that was 10.32 million. And the full-time equivalent staffing at that time stood at 259 members of staff. 1.3 shows how in the first year of operation post-launch, the budget allocated to the shared service was 9.799 million, and 1.4 explains how savings have been found in subsequent years. So as a result, 1.5 explains how the 23-24, I do apologise, shared regulatory services agreed budget is £8.645 million, and the full-time equivalent staffing is in the region of 180 members of staff. So 10 years on from that baseline assessment of 2013-14, despite the pay awards and the other pressures, the services are being delivered for a budget of £1.7 million, which is £1.7 million less, which is a 16% less budget, and 82 or 32% less staff. During that time, of course, service has taken on additional responsibilities under new legislation, and we've spoken about some areas of new legislation in an earlier report. So as a result of the very challenging financial outlook going into 24-25, the partner authorities now require consideration of options for further savings to be made from the service, and options have been requested for achieving savings of 3% and 5% from the core services budget, which is the responsibility of the Joint Committee. And that really is the content of Part 1 of the report, Chair. And the recommendation for this is to note the content of the report with a view to decisions being made on the shared regulatory services budget savings report, which will be introduced under Part 2 of the meeting agenda.
Okay, thank you for that, Helen. I think knowing that we will move to Part 2, where we can have a sort of wider discussion on this, I'm not going to take any questions on this particular part of the report, but I would ask for a mover and seconder on Part 1 before we move to Part 2.
Happy to move again.
Thank you, Councillor. And anyone else?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. Cool. At which point I need to ask the committee's permission to remove the public from the sitting, so we sit in private to discuss the budget openly. Would everyone be comfortable with that move? Does anyone object? No. Excellent. Could Democratic Services please remove the public and stop the recording?
Thank you, Chair. We'll do that now. If you will bear with us, my colleague who's actually going to stop the live streaming as well will let us know when that live streaming has concluded, and then we can move into Part 2.
Great, thank you. We don't have live streaming in Bridgend, I don't think, so it's a brave new world for me. We do it all by smoke signal, you see.
Chair, my apologies for being late to the meeting, but I do have to admire your Christmas jumper.
Thank you very
It's
much.
very busy, but very colourful.
It is very busy. I'm very I have to finish this committee meeting, and then I have to race off to a community centre to eat some overly cooked turkey. So I thought
Lovely.
I'd mix it up.